Hi, this is Grandma here in rainy Houston. I think I better stop this railroad before so that I can talk over it. Okay, just go over here and we will turn the power off. How's that? Whew, much better. Okay, today we are going to build a rail, a powered rail in MakeCode for Minecraft. And we're going to have several mobs that can ride in it. We're going to use Minecraft blocks as buttons, like that one will cause a llama to be put in the Minecraft that was generated on the track. Now they're not moving because the power is turned off on the rail. When the rail is broken, we can repair it, which is cool. And the way we generate this mob in the minecart is to handle the on minecart used event to place a mob in a certain position. And that is what this program does. Now, let's go over to the code. And before we get too far gone, I want to share the code, and I'm going to share the link with you. So first of all, this is Rail version 3.4. I always version my code. Whoops, that's not it. Let me try that again. Copy. Paste. I always have a version, and every time I make a change, when the changes become significant, or if I'm going to move to another machine, which happens fairly often, then I make a version and I publish it. I also might save it to a directory, but on my local machine, depending on which machine I'm using. Okay, there is the link. So now you have the code. So let's now go to make this code window large. And this is the code. And we've seen a brief demo already, although maybe we'll show another one in a few minutes. So this code is it's not that large really for a game, particularly if you just approach building it one routine at a time. And a lot of this code is fairly repetitive. Like all of this code over here is handling button breaks. And this is the code that builds the rail. I like to write my code so that it reads from up to down and then right to left. So you read all the way down, then there, then there. And I group my code, kind of according to what it does. The beginning stuff is over here, and the more action-oriented stuff that causes the game to do something is over here. Now, the hard part of the game is to figure out how you're going to lay out the rail. And so what I would actually do is make a drawing of how I want the rail to be laid out and where I want everything to be. Now, in this drawing, standing where I am, the player, which direction am I pointing? Which direction am I looking? Which is important to know when you start doing the code. You have to know which direction you're building. Excuse me. Well, there's a sunflower over here, and sunflowers always face east. So I am facing east. So this corner would be, what is it? It would be the I don't think that's the right one. Have I lost it? Oh, there it is. This would be the northwest corner. This is the northeast corner. Remember, in if you're facing east, then this would be the northeast corner, this would be the southeast, and down here would be southwest. Now, why do I think of this as facing east? Because didn't we learn our directions, kind of facing north? But anyway, best to think of it facing east. And then when you face east, the coordinates that you have to specify in building things are always, most of the time, they're positive. So that makes life much easier. So let's look at these special positions that I've identified to make this game work. First of all, we need the corners of the rail. See the corners? So then once we have the corner positions, then we just build the rails in between, and then we know exactly where to place the corners. Then we need this position right here is very special. I call it the spawn position. And that's when a mob is spawned, like a chicken or a llama or a shulker. They always respond right exactly there. And why do I need to know where right exactly there? Well, that's where the player places a minecart. And when the minecart is placed, it generates an event. And in the code for that event, the mob is placed in that same position. Therefore, the mob usually winds up in the minecart. Cool, huh? Okay, this button right here, and that helps you identify where the spawn position is. And it's kind of in the middle, more or less, of the side. And the purpose of that button is if you break that button, then there's a Boolean variable set so that you do not generate spawn a mob when you place a minecart. Sometimes you want empty minecarts. I like riding in a minecart occasionally, and it helps if they're empty. Now this button right here, if you were watching the demo earlier, the red button turns the power off. And then that button becomes a gravel color or dirt color, and it turns the power back on when you break it. Now, when you're placing minecarts, it's pretty common to make a mistake and break the rail. And of course, then the railroad doesn't work very well. Well, this button, the purpose of that is to repair the rail. So if you click that button, it rebuilds the rail. These buttons select the mob. So once you break one of these buttons, from then on, a mob that's placed here, when a minecart's placed here, the mob that was previously selected will be put in the minecart. Sometimes, most of the time. So the position you want here is you want to remember where this square is, because that's the northwest corner of where all the buttons are. And then all the other buttons are placed relative to those. So I call that the button anchor. I think of all of these things really as anchors because they anchor the positions. The positions become relative to that spot. So I just call them anchors. Okay. Now, the code, if I had 2 hours on this show, I would go through every piece of code and build it up from scratch. But I don't have 2 hours, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through most of the code and, oops, I know it's over here somewhere. And we're going to go through most of the code and explain how it works and actually look at some of the individual statements. So when I first started writing this, the first thing I did was start with something that looks like this. Now, usually you would, in MakeCode, you often want an on-start thingy like this, which when the program starts running, it would run that code for initialization. But because I didn't want to have to start and stop my program every time I wanted a new railroad built, I created this chat command. I don't have an on start. Therefore, I can run the on-chat command run, and it will build a new railroad. Why don't we just look at that? Hi. Now, when you come back to the Minecraft screen, the code isn't actually running, although you might see a railroad that you had previously built. So we just type in run, and it builds a new railroad and new buttons, and then it positions the player to look at it. Now, I'll just throw this in. See that? It didn't make a curve there. See, usually Minecraft will make a curve when you place the corners last. But every now and then it does that. So now if I want to build another railroad, I can say run again. It will move me to a new location, and it will do everything. And then look at that. See, I have all my curves. And there I'm placing a chicken who's not going to move very far until I do something else, like I could try placing another chicken real close to it, or at least a minecart. You have to have the minecart selected down in your inventory for it to work. Okay, let's go back to the code and hope those chickens don't get too noisy. So the first thing I want to really focus on in this code is that I want the player to move to a totally new position in my flat world. So I want it to be, I'll move about 200 blocks east, because that number is positive, relative to where I was, and I definitely want to be on the ground. So, because I don't want to build my railroad in the air. Okay, so that then gets me to a clean spot. Then I have a parameter, or it's a variable here that tells how long each side of the railroad is. So it's going to be 10 blocks. And I always calculate this when I'm doing using a variable to calculate positions. I frequently need a variable that's -1, the length of the object. So I always just calculate it. Oops, see there? That wouldn't have worked very well. Side -1. Wonder how I built that railroad. Oh well, we won't think about that. Okay, then we set the anchors. Now you remember what the anchors were. All of those positions that, like the corners of the railroad, where the button area is, the spawn position and so on. We're going to go set all those anchors, and once we've done it, the code is actually relatively easy. You've done the hard work once you have the anchors. So I have a little function here called set anchors, and the first thing we're going to do is set the corner positions, and I'm going to show you that in just a sec. Then we're going to set the spawn position, and the spawn position, remember the rail northwest corner, kind of the lower area? Well, if you, the spawn position is first of all a position on the rail, and it's going to be half a side length east. So that's what this says, half a side length east. Then I'm going to set all the button positions, which is tedious. But so here's the corners. Setting the corners. I named them, guess what? Rail northwest corner, rail northeast corner. It's kind of tedious to type such long variable names, and that's one reason I wouldn't have a chance of building this program from scratch all in 1 hour. But you really need to name your variables some meaningful name, so that when you're reading the code 6 months later or whatever, or somebody else is reading it, you know what the variable is. So I just arbitrarily decide that I'm going to build a rail starting 2 blocks east of where the player is standing. Okay, it could have been 3, could have been 4. I went pretty close to me so I could watch it being built, and it could have been any other place nearby me, but 2 blocks east seemed good enough for me. Then the rail northeast corner, which is the one more towards the east, or towards the top of the screen as I think of it, then that is starting from the rail northwest corner, it would be side -1 east. So that's all there is to that. Then once you have the once you have the northeast corner, then you can build the corner that's southeast relative to that, and you just move it over. You're going over to the left, side -1 blocks. Similarly, when you have this southeast corner built, it's at the bottom, you're going to have to go left or to the north in order to, and this is a negative number because I decided to build it relative to that. Okay, I think I just skipped some logic there. Okay, I got ahead of myself. Okay. Northwest corner is just in front of the player. Northeast corner is to the east, that's up. Southeast corner is to the right towards the south, which is this slot. And then once we have the south block, then we move down towards the west to do the rail southwest corner. Sorry, I had misspoken earlier. I do sometimes make mistakes, and it's not all because I'm 77 years old. It's just the nature of coding and talking and thinking about the logic all at once. Okay, we now have anchors, which is a very happy thing to have. Once we have all those anchors, we can then build a rail. We can place the buttons. Let's go back down here. See this? Set the button positions. So all the buttons also get placed in this set anchors routine. Let's go over and look at some briefly, really briefly. This is the set buttons. So here we set the mob or not button position, and the relative to the spawn position, which is right on the rail. We want it to be lower because we want the buttons to be even with the ground, and we want it to be towards the north, so we say -1. And I could go back to the, let's see if I have that drawing still up. Yes. See, it's to the north, and that's a spawn position, so this mob or not button is just to the north of it, and it's down 1 level. The power not button position is similarly real close by, and I will leave the rest of these for you to work through. So we'll go back over here. Now we have button positions, and we have rail corner positions, and we've got pretty much everything we need. So we can build the rail, we can place the buttons, and another thing we need to do, we have a variable called that we have to set to remember which mob to spawn. And we have a routine over here which I will show you in just a moment. We'll come back to that after I explain these other things. And once we've set that to chicken, that's what it's initialized to, say chicken, okay. We will then teleport over towards that north side, so we can be right in the middle of the buttons, so they're really easy to reach. And we just position ourselves 2 blocks back of the mob or not button position. And I always place myself a sunflower, so I know what position to is east, so I can verify my rail got built correctly. And then I have to give some stuff to the player. What do I mean by that? Well, you notice when I ran the game, the HUD had some things in it. So here's where I do that. I first clear out my inventory, and I give myself a few mine carts, and I give myself a rail in case I can't get the corners to work. I'll show you that later maybe. I also want to keep the weather clear, so I just let that run forever. And I find moving me very handy because once I've built a rail and I've got a bunch of mobs on it, they can be very noisy. So I have a way to just teleport myself out of there so I don't have to listen to them all the time. Now, we're going to go back up here, and we're going to build the rail. How about that? Here's build the rail. We're going to place the rails, okay, and then we're going to place the corners. Now, why do I have to do that? Well, it's a Minecraft thing. In order to make a corner, you have to have the two rails that intersect built first, and then you place a block that's going to be the corner, and Minecraft is supposed to make it curve. Well, one of the cute things is that powered rails, there is no curving for powered rails. So you have to use a non-powered rail to place in the corner. Probably didn't want to know all that, but I will tell you, back when I didn't know that, it took me a long time to figure out how to build rails with corners. Okay, we're going to place the rails. Now, isn't this cool? All we do is we call a routine we have called do one rail side, and let's look at that quickly. I'm going to do one rail side from this position to that position. First, I'm going to wipe out the rail that was there. Why? Because it has to do with corners and something. Basically, sometimes things don't work like you want if you don't erase the old ones. Then you place the powered rail from position 1 to position 2, and then you place the, what is this? You know what this is. This is redstone. That's where the power comes from. You place it under, see this -1? It means it's going under the same position as the rail went. So that does one rail. So do one rail from there to there and blah, blah, blah. So you just use the drawing I made to figure out which rail goes to where. And so we first build this one to there, this one to there, this one to there, this one to there, and it's done. Now, what I do is I'm going to not place the corners so you can see how this works. Now see, the rails are built from, but there's no curving corner. And so, now if we go back to the code, so that's how you go back to the code. If I put the corners in, and we don't really have to do anything else, so I could go over here and just build the rail. And see, this is how you debug, really. You don't try to build it all and then figure out why it didn't work when you ran it. Each thing that you add, you need to figure out if it worked correctly before you move on. Okay. You see that? All the corners came out curved except those two. Now, if I run it again, it's likely they will all be curved like they should be, or sometimes they just will not. And if I run it again, they might all be curved. So I have a way of fixing this manually. So what you do is you select your rail, you wipe out that one, and then you put that one in there, and it's curved. Oh, did you notice that? I'm breaking that grass, but it's coming back. Well, I found that when I was playing with this, I kept breaking the grass by accident, and the holes sometimes interfered with my mobs and so on. So I built a little function that if you break grass, it just puts it back to the same position it broke it. Isn't that cool? Okay, now let's go back to the code. Look, so our rail is built correctly, although sometimes its corners didn't work. That's Minecraft. Then we place the buttons, and we might as well go ahead and do all of this stuff. We place the buttons, we set a variable to say we will spawn, and the animal's going to be chicken. I'll just show you that. This is kind of the heart and soul of the program. So I'm gonna, these 4 routines cause the magic with regard to spawning. This gadget, when I first started programming MakeCode in Minecraft, we didn't have an on-item used event. So I was just, and I tried to build this program before, but I just couldn't figure out how to put a mob in a minecart. So when this happened, it was perfect. So when a minecart is placed, this event is triggered. And I have a Boolean variable, which I always precede with B, so I can remember them. B, do spawn. Well, sometimes we set, when we break this block over here, we turn do spawn to negative, so that we would not do the spawn, and it would just place a minecart. But if we're going to spawn, right then we spawn mob to spawn, which is a variable set to, see that? Set to whatever it set to when it was called last, and it was, in our case, in the beginning, it's set to chicken. But whatever block you broke, it's set to that. Okay, and that generates a mob, usually in the minecart. And then when you remember the button, mob or not button, which is kind of gray, and arbitrarily I just put some black under it. So when that button is broken, first of all, you just call this routine and put the button back like it's supposed to be, because it's broken. Okay, and then you set the do spawn to false, and so that there will be no mob placed in the minecart until another mob button is selected. We'll just go look at one. Here's the chicken. If white block is broken, then we call place Minecraft button, put it back because he broke it, and then we call set spawn routine with chicken. And all of these work the same way, and that is really cool. So here we're going to have a oranges button, and when that button, we're going to place it, and when that button is broken, it will trigger this event, and that's the Ocelot. And then the first thing we do is always we put the button back where it's supposed to be. So we have this function, which is called place the Ocelot button, and it is run both in the beginning to place the buttons, and it's also run when the button is broken. So this way you only have to specify this position one time. I found that I kept going back, changing things, and so if I specified this in 2 locations, if I had this in 2 locations, I was prone to errors. So this makes the code much cleaner, is to have a routine that does that rather than having to individually write them. Now, we built the railroad. We didn't really look at the place the corner code, so let's look at that. See, that couldn't be much easier. We call replace rail corners, and we give it each corner. That one, okay. Then here is replace the corners code, and the first thing we do is we erase both the corner rail and the dirt under it, just for the heck of it. Then we fill the corner with air. And this is just in case the dirt got broken. Then we fill it with air so the corner is not there. It doesn't seem to work right if you don't get rid of the rail that's there. And then you place a rail at the corner, and hopefully it curves. It's supposed to curve. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. which is kind of like the real world. So I'm all down with that. Okay, so now we have built a rail. And we have talked about the next thing. If we went over here back to our driver code, we placed the buttons, and I showed you the place button thingy. And one thing I want to show you about that, place button code, here it is. Look at this code. It calls place chicken button, place ocelot button, place Schlurker button. Well, that's because we have this routine which does it, and we have to replace it if it gets broken. So that's what I was saying. There were 2 places I had to do that, and it's easier just to make a function out of it. And so that places all the buttons. And while we're here, I'll just show you. This is what if a grass is broken, what I do is replace, if there's air at this position, one below where the player is standing, or one below the northwest corner, which was where the player was standing, and I put it slightly outside the bounds of the rail. That's what these position adjustments do. And so if there is air, it replaces it with grass. So if you break one block, this replaces it no matter where it was. If you happen to place break 3 or 4 blocks, it would replace those. Okay. So now we are just about to the totally good stuff. This is where I teleport the player to be just back of that mob or not button, because that's kind of the center of the rail and it's kind of the center of the buttons. Place a sunflower, and then I give stuff to the player. We've already talked about that. Now, so if you just do that part, the game does nothing, because the player has to do something in order to make things happen. One thing you can do is place a minecart by quick tapping or right-clicking the button. Another thing you can do is to break a button, and there's all of these buttons which pick the mob to be spawned, and there are other buttons like this one is this is the rail repair operation, and if it's broken, what it does is it completely rebuilds the railroad. And it also, in the course of doing that, it sets the railroad to be powered on, so you want to place this at that location. Let's go over to the screen and just review that a bit. Build a rail, build a rail, build a rail. Okay, so we built the rail. We got corners. I can't quite see the corners down there, but we'll assume they're smooth. So everything is built correctly. This is the mob or not button. That's the spawn position. This is the power or not button. See, that turned the power off. Now the mine carts, if they were running around the track, would stop. We'll demo each of these in a minute. And what if I broke something? Well, I can fix it by repairing it. And then it's going to turn this power on button because it repaired it by putting the rail back to powered. Then when you first start, if you place a minecart right there, I'm going to right click. Before I do that, I have to be sure down in my HUD a minecart is selected. So I did that by pressing 1. I selected that position, and now I'm going to paste. There's a chicken. Yay. Okay. Now if I select Ocelot, there's an Ocelot. Notice it put the Ocelot, see, it jumped in. It put the Ocelot in the spawn position, but the cart wasn't quite there. So that always happens. And then the mob will usually jump in any empty cart, so that works out very well. Oh my goodness! That Ocelot ate the chicken. That happens. That's life. Okay, let's go make another one. Okay, now let's look at some of these other. We've done power knot, we've done repair the rail. Let's explore a few more of these. I broke the button. It comes back so fast you don't hardly realize you broke it. Now that is the llama. There's the llama. Now how do you get a llama moving? Well, one way is to just bushing. Now probably he will go around that rail just about as long as you want him to. Not always. Sometimes he goes right off the edge of a corner. And then if you start putting other things, like let's put a vindicator. See what happens. Now they're going to bounce off of each other, but one of them stopped. Okay, bang. Okay, now they're going to both go. Notice that they bounce before they quite hit, which is entertaining. That's an evoker. Cool. That's a chicken. And my favorite, Slurker. I like Slurkers. Okay. Now, let's, well, yeah. Now let's go down and look at how some of this code works. Some more of this code works. Now the repair the rail code is a little bit complicated. So this is it. This is where we started. So if there's a redstone showing, and if we break it, then we put back this wood button and we swap redstone and wood in the entire area of the rail. So that's what changes it to wood underneath the rail, which turns the power off. Then if it's wood, it does exactly the opposite. It puts back redstone because you switched it, and you swap the two items again. And to make this easy, you have this little routine that has a parameter called block, and we place whichever block, which could be wood or I think it's dirt actually. It could be dirt or, what is that? Yeah, it's coarse dirt. Okay, sorry, but not wood. Okay, now here is the swap, which is kind of interesting. You're going to swap this block for this one. So it just uses a big old replace. If the block is this block, it replaces it with that. And it's right in the rail area. And notice it's -1 from the corners. See, if you have these opposing corners, it does the entire rail. And it's -1 because the redstone is underneath the rail. We could go look at that again. Okay. We have to make a new one. Now, why can't I just hit this one? Well, because the code's not actually running until I say run. This is left over from the previous run. Okay. Sometimes I forget to do the thing. There. Okay, let's put a chicken on there. Let's get him moving. Now suppose I want him to... he went right off the rail. Okay, I do that sometimes too. Go right off the rail. Now he's moving. Did the same thing. Oh, you know what? I bet that corner's broken. See, that corner didn't make a corner. Okay. We're going to do this all again. Okay, did all my corners make? Let's see. I'll make a chicken. I'm going to get him moving. Okay, he's moving. Now, suppose I want him to stop. Take his power away. Now, if I want him to go back to moving, I have to do that. But he lost all of his momentum. So now he won't move until I start him up again. Well, there's a couple of ways to start him up. I could go bump him again, but another way is to just place something on the track and place another one right there. Now we have motion. And notice I placed the minecart so that, oh well, you'll figure this out as you use it. Okay, let's go see if there's some important part of the code that we haven't seen yet. We looked at all of these. We built the rail, which is what this code does. It first places the rail and then it places the corners. And here is the minecart operation, where the minecart is placed by the player and an item event is triggered, which spawns a mob. And this is where, what is that? Oh, that's repair the rail. So we looked at that. Repair the rail just simply rebuilds the rail. That's what it does. And these are the buttons that select the mob. This is these routines, oops, these right here, these four, turn the power on and off. This one replaces the grass if it breaks. And okay, that one's part of setting the corners, and that is it. I think I'll go play with it a little bit more since we have a little time here. Now, what kind of modifications would you make to this program? I have actually built a much more ambitious writing the rail, which you can find on my blog, which is at MakeCode.com. And in that I had a fence. I had another way to select mobs, which was quite a lot more complicated, but it required using a lot of chat commands. And I don't like using chat commands because I'm looking at this beautiful graphical interface here, and I'm looking at a beautiful graphical interface on my code. So going to a chat command all the time to do things is just, it's like going back in time 30 years. And yeah, I remember that because, yeah, I'm way old enough to remember that. But anyway, other things you could do would be to have a lot more mobs to choose from. For whatever reason, my other program, the mobs didn't run off the rails as much as on this one. I've experimented to find out if it's because of the size, but that didn't seem to be the case. It might have something to do with Education Edition. I don't know. And I plan to experiment with that in the future. Okay, what else might you want to do? Well, one thing that's kind of entertaining is to put a bunch of empty minecarts and put a bunch of mobs out in the middle of this field. And if you have a fence, they can't get out. And so usually all of the mobs you put out in the middle will wind up in a minecart if they're room. So that's pretty cool. That's a feature I didn't do here because it involved too many options that I didn't want that many buttons. Because you can't label anything when you're looking here. There's no help. I can't give you any help. So, I mean, give the player any help. So it makes things a little complicated. What else might you do to this program to make it more fun? Well, I'm not thinking of anything else right now. Well, obviously you could build lots of buildings and you could put the rail inside an aquarium and you could do all that stuff, but that's for another day. Okay, I will leave you now. This is Grandma at MakeCode, and you can look for this video on past streams on the MakeCode site. It will also be on my YouTube channel at on the MakeCode Mixer site. The videos only stay there for about 2 weeks, but it will also be on my YouTube channel, which is called We Code MakeCode. And we code MakeCode here in Minecraft Arcade, and now we're beginning to use Microbit because it has some wonderful new features that I'm having a lot of fun exploring. And next week's program, I think, will be in Arcade, unless I get my Microbit recursion program working. Bye. Well, bye.